Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving deep and peeling back the layers of human identity using some truly mind-bending discoveries that sit right at the intersection of quantum neuroscience and deep metaphysics. We're going to look at exactly how your physical brain creates the feeling of you and how ancient philosophies actually align perfectly with modern science to completely deconstruct that feeling. So let's jump right into this. I want you to ask yourself right now and really think about it. Who are you, really? Are you your thoughts? Are you your constantly shifting emotions? Maybe the societal roles you play at work or at home? Or are you something entirely different? It's a question we've been asking for millennia, but the sources we're exploring today actually give us a highly specific, startlingly scientific answer. The research we're unpacking suggests something wild. It proposes that your rigid sense of self is, in fact, an operational fiction. What does that mean? Well, it basically means the I you feel inside your head isn't an independent, real entity at all. It's a functional simulation, a simulated subject that your neurobiology built just to help you survive and navigate the physical world. It is incredibly convincing, for sure, but ultimately, it's totally devoid of inherent reality. To guide you through this pretty massive paradigm shift, we're going to follow 5 simple steps. We'll look at the ladder of identities, the biology of the simulated subject, identity as striving, the mirror of awareness, and finally, transcending the illusion. All right, part 1, the ladder of identities. Let's start right at the surface with the heavy armor we kind of just put on every single morning. According to our sources, identity isn't just one solid thing. It's structured a lot like a ladder of varying densities. At the very top, the absolute densest layers are our social and imposed masks. These are the roles we're forced into. Right beneath that is our narrative identity. That's the story we tell ourselves to fend off the fear of non-existence. Further down is the witness identity, where we actually start to observe our own mental conditioning. And finally, at the very bottom is the ultimate freedom of non-identity. The whole goal of this journey is essentially climbing down this ladder. Let's look at this character, Mira, from our source text to make this concrete. Her parents completely loved a version of her that they carved out of rigid perfectionist expectations. Her identity was basically a hostage situation. It was a costume. But Mira performs this quiet rebellion. She simply undoes her meticulously braided hair. This one small act of undoing the braid perfectly symbolizes stepping away from that imposed social mask. And as we start shedding these outer layers, something incredibly liberating happens. Take another character from the text, Henry. Henry discovers that his personality traits, whether he's feeling confident or calm or shy, are totally fluid. They're just borrowed attitudes. When you deeply recognize that your narrative identity is impermanent, you just stop clinging to it. The deep-seated fear of non-existence vanishes because you realize you were never that fixed story to begin with. You become, at once, all identities and no identities. Which brings us to part 2, the simulated subject. If our personality really is just a fluid story, how on earth does the physical brain construct this intensely convincing feeling of I? Well, the biological illusion kicks off in something called a cortical microcolumn. This cylinder-like network of about 100 neurons is the basic functional unit of your cortex. Modern neuroscience shows us that the brain acts as a massive prediction machine, continually generating models of the world to minimize error. So the whole illusion of the self literally starts in the frantic, predictive activity of these tiny microcolumns. Because this massive biological architecture needs a central point to integrate all its sensory predictions, it hallucinates a subject. It builds a self-model. What the sources call the subjectivity error happens when the brain mistakes the tight, coherent coordination of its own networks for an actual, independent inner point of view. We presume we're this tiny person inside our head who is independently conscious, but scientifically, that feeling is just an inference. It's the brain making a biological guess. And this operational fiction is anchored physically through quantum mechanics. When neurotransmitters in your brain, like glutamate, resonate with the background energy of the universe, known as the zero-point field, it triggers an orchestrated avalanche of brain activity. We mistakenly experience this physical quantum coordination as our distinct psychological self. Okay, part 3, identity as striving. If the self is basically just a neurobiological trick orchestrating sensory data, why do we hold on to it with such fierce psychological resistance? In the Invariance Ontology framework we're exploring today, Identity isn't some static, boring fact about you. It's actually a contraction of the soul, driven by active, constant striving. Specifically, it's defined as the negation of a lack. It is your mind's exhausting insistence that a perceived deficiency absolutely must not exist. On a cosmic scale, this is the world soul negating formlessness, with the body's energy centers or chakras acting as thresholds where the soul literally says no to the void to establish a localized me. You are quite literally desiring yourself into existence. And identifying with this defensively constructed self creates what the sources perfectly term egoic mass. Just look at these traits: self-importance, shame, defensiveness. This egoic mass is a super dense psychological armor. It exists for one reason: to protect the inner image of the false self from reality. It's that awful friction you feel when someone insults you or challenges your core beliefs. It is the mind's absolute refusal to drop the illusion, because to the ego, dropping the illusion feels exactly like death.
Moving on to part 4, the mirror of awareness. To actually break free from this suffocating egoic mass, we have to completely shift our perspective.
I want you to think of consciousness like a mirror. Your true nature, that's the glass of the mirror itself. The glass represents pure, unfragmented awareness. It's unchanging, it's inherently legitimate, and it is perfectly at rest. But everything else, your thoughts, your emotions, the ego, and even the observer inside your head trying to figure all this stuff out, is simply a reflection passing across the surface of that glass. The reflections are fluid and temporary. The glass is eternal. The source texts use this heartbreakingly beautiful metaphor for this. They say the human mind is like a child desperately chasing a toy. The toy represents all our worldly experiences, desires, and identities. And pure awareness is like the mother, watching silently, lovingly, and completely without judgment. But the child can never see the mother because it's entirely absorbed in the toy. Holding onto your identity is simply the act of the child refusing to drop the toy to look up at the mother. Finally, part 5, transcending the illusion. How do we actually pull the plug on this multi-layered operational fiction? It all happens in a moment of radical insight, where you realize that the observer is the observed. Think about it. The thinker inside your head, the one judging your thoughts right now, is built from the exact same conditioned mental material as the thoughts themselves. The observer isn't pure awareness, it's just another reflection in the mirror. When you deeply realize this, when you see that the observer and the observed are the exact same illusion, the boundary between them instantly collapses. The striving just stops. So what's actually left when that observer dissolves? What remains when the operational fiction shuts down? It's a state described in the sources as Aham Prakasha, which translates to I am light. Emphatically, this is not a new identity you have to build. It's just the acknowledgement of the pure, self-luminous presence that has always been there, resting silently beneath all the noise, remaining perfectly intact when all those temporary labels and reflections are finally tossed away. In this state, absolutely everything shifts. You see that identity was just a temporary contraction of the soul. You realize you aren't the reflections, you are the silent witness they all return to. Letting go of identity isn't a rejection of yourself, it's actually a movement towards your true self. And maybe most powerfully, the world's role as an evaluator of your worth entirely vanishes. You no longer need to strive to earn a place in the universe, because you realize you are the very condition that allows the universe to appear in the first place. So as we wrap up this explainer today, the next time you feel that heavy, familiar urge to defend your ego or assert your identity, I want you to pause, remember the mirror, and ask yourself this lingering question. If you finally drop the toy of identity, who is the one watching?